Hello, this is F2 Fan 5000. Welcome to my 2026 FIA Formula 3 predictions video. And, well, there's some grim predictions ahead, and that's quite a strange thing to say. Usually they're just predictions, but no, this one are grim predictions. And why is that? Let's get a bit dramatic here. This is going to be a season of, drivers having their careers ruined, the trajectory they thought being spoiled. And why is that? Well, here's the thing about the 2026 lineups. It's actually a very strong grid, right? This is a very strong. The problem is that the very best drivers are all concentrated in a couple of teams that have been successful over the past couple of years. So and especially with this new ground effects cars, I don't have to tell you, Campos, Trident, they're the pick of the bunch. MP Motorsport have been moving up the ladder, and the other teams not so much. So what does all that mean? I can see a world where there's 8 drivers in particular who are going to absolutely scoop up most of the big points, especially in the feature races. So let's talk about the 8 drivers. So let's start with Trident, right? This team is absolutely loaded, right? This is an absolutely stacked lineup. Noah Stromstead, the highest returning driver from last year, and on his day was able to run with Rafael Camara. Freddie Slater, who needs no introduction, who's well on his way to Formula 1, and Matteo Di Paolo. Di Paolo is probably the driver that people are sleeping on the most. He fought fast Freddie Slater for the title in Formula Regional European Championship last year, and I think he's the driver that is most likely going to be people don't see coming this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if he can take the title, right? So that Trident, 3 very strong drivers. Trident are that team that are in such a strong form in Formula 3. And then we go to Campos. We've got Teofil Nall, who's also one of the highest returning drivers from last year. And, took quite a few podiums, even though he was with Van Amersfoort. Then we've got Ugo Ugachukwu, who just won the Formula Regional Oceania Trophy, who set the fastest time in Super Formula testing last year. And then if we look at MP Motorsport, Mattia Colnaghi dominated Eurocup 3 last year. Tuukka Tarpinen is one of the highest rated drivers. Again, like Teofil Nall and Stromstead, one of the most highly rated returning drivers. And then we've also got Alessandro Giusti, the Williams Jr., who also finished in the top 10 of the championship last year. There's one driver I have to talk about here, Ernesto Rivera. I believe he's the youngest driver on the grid. Or one of the younger. I think he's the youngest driver on the grid. And based on what I saw in Formula Regional Oceania, he's a good driver, but I don't see him being ready for this. I think he could have done another year. He could have done a year in Formula Regional, in my opinion, before making the step up, because if people expect him to win this championship on his debut season, I think that's quite a tough ask. He doesn't quite look to be ready. So, but with those 3 teams and those 8 drivers that I highlighted, I can't see how the other teams and the other drivers get a look in, and there's a lot of talent there. Right, ART have quite a good lineup. Canate Lea struggled in Europe, but he was quite a strong driver in Formula Regional Oceania just now. It's his teammates who are more impressive on paper. Taito Kato is a fast young junior out of Japan, and Maciej Gladic has been very fast in Spanish F4 and Euro Cup 3. Well, he only finished 10th in Euro Cup 3 last year, and I really feel as though this promotion to F3 is a little bit too soon, but still, there's a lot of promise with Maciej Gladic and Taito Kato, and I can't, but ART have been struggling more recently with their car, and I can't see how, remember James Wharton finished second in Formula Regional back in 2024, and 2025 he doesn't register, and I think this is young, inexperienced drivers. ART are struggling. I can't really see how they're going to challenge Campos, Trident and MP Motorsport. To me, there's just, even though the talent is there, I can't see how they're going to make the impact they want to make, and this sort of year that might be coming for them can really negatively affect your career. And then we come to Van Amersfoort. Hiyu Yamikoshi is another fast young Japanese talent. Bruno Del Pino is in his second season, and Enzo Delaney, who finished third in Formula Regional European Championship last year. Van Amersfoort can, at this level, even last year, since the ground effects, they can spring a surprise result. But last year you had some drivers in the top teams, like in Trident you had Charlie Wirtz, you had Tzanopol in for Truvazak. At Campos, when you have drivers like that, I think it's easier to penetrate into the podium positions and have a strong result, rather than, when those teams absolutely have stacked. And I think that even though Yamakoshi, Deligny, very promising talents, Del Pino could be, I'm not 100% convinced either way. I just can't see how they're going to consistently fight for podiums in feature races. Or, I can see a lot of people who have a lot of talent having terrible seasons, because you got to remember, FIA F3, 30 drivers. There's points only down to 10th place, but there's 30 drivers. So, I think you got to be, even if you're in the top half of the drivers, you could be 11th or 12th, and at the end of the day, that's no points, and no one cares. And if Campos, Trident, MP, their cars are in this, set up very well, and your car is just a little bit behind. And then we come to Rodin Motorsport. We've got Pedro Calero, Brando Badoer, and Christian Ho. Three very promising drivers. Christian Ho, a Euro Cup 3 champion. Brando Badoer and Pedro Calero have both finished fourth, or did Brando Badoer finish fifth? But either way, first season top 5 in Formula Regional European Championship, and the talent's there, but it's just not quite as talented as I said, them top 3 teams. And Rodin, I wouldn't bet that Rodin can fight continually near the top. Not when the top teams are that stacked. Same with Premier, James Wharton, Louis Sharp, even Jose Garcia, he's really not that bad, So the talent is there, but we know how much Prema have struggled in the years since we've had ground effects. F2 and F3 last year, disaster really for the Prema drivers. And this could be the end. Like Lewis Sharp, James Wharton, both going into their second F3 campaign. And Prema already have wobbles. Like, why did Enzo Deligny leave before the season starts, Why did that happen? They bring in Jose Garfias. Doesn't make sense. And you got to think something's wrong. So these two drivers, that could be it for them, Wharton once part of the Ferrari Driver Academy, no longer. Once a Freck vice champion, but now stuck in F3's midfield. I just don't see a way for these drivers out of F3's midfield. Coming to high tech, Fionn McLaughlin is a very promising talent for the future, but this feels like, from what I saw in Formula Regional Oceania, I'm not sure he's quite ready to make that step up to F3. He was driving in British F4 last year. Jin Nakamura, had an excellent campaign in Formula Regional Oceania, always on the podium. Michael Shin, very highly experienced at this sort of Formula 3, Formula Regional level. The talent is there, but high tech in F3 of late, they're very strong in F2, but F3, the team is struggling to make an impact, and these drivers, I think one of them's not ready, and the other two might struggle just to make the impact to regularly get, into the upper echelons of the top 10, the top 5 places. I just don't see it happening. Not when as I said, you just got look at this list of names that are in the top 3 teams: Kolnagi, Tarpanen, Slater, DeParlo, Okachukwu. That's this generation, they're the best drivers that are coming out. This sort of 2007, 2008, they're the very best. And these drivers like Nakamura, McLaughlin, Shin, they're up against that. And then the team that they're with is just getting into that top, like maybe they can get a 10th or 9th place, but I think most of these teams are fighting over 8th or 9th place at best, at most races, at the feature races, And then AIX, Brad Benavides can spring a surprise. Yifan David is a strong driver. Yifan David is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, right? A strong driver, solid driver, but as we saw in Formula Regional Oceania, very tough to get near the podium when you've got a field that's that stacked and there's differentiation between the teams. AIX getting ahead of Campos of Trident, that's a hard sell. Fernando Barrichello, I think his path to this point is quite unique. So I think a lot remains to be seen how he's going to go. And Dams, I think this team has signed up for the back. I'm not saying they won't score points, but I see it's going to be very hard for this team to score points. Last year, I'm trying to remember, I know Christian Ho scored some points. Lacorte didn't. And Gerard G scored 1 point when he was driving for High Tech. And Nandavod Birimbakti was a midfielder in Formula Regional level. A midfielder. I can't see how this team is going to... I'm not saying they won't score points, but unless there's a crazy race, well, this is FIA Formula 3. There's going to be a crazy race. It's going to be crazy. But this team, I can't see on a normal weekend, no rain, no tyre, like wet tyres, dry tyres, a normal weekend. I can't see how they're actually going to score points because just look at how stacked this grid is. And these three drivers all leave a lot to be desired, in my opinion. I'm not saying they're bad drivers. You have to be pretty good to be able to run with the pack at this level. But what you have to see who the opposition is, who the drivers are in the other teams. And even Gerard G was struggling to score points in Formula Regional Middle East. How are you going to go against this lot of drivers in F3? And Dams, that's the old Genza team. They're possibly the back of the pack. So I can see this team, Dams, Lucas Oil, being the team that is at the back of the pack, and come the end of the year is cut adrift in the standings from the other teams. I think that's highly likely. And as I said, I feel like all these teams, ART, Van Amersfoort, Roden, Prema, Hi-Tech, AIX, they're just, in the feature races, I feel like they're going to be fighting for crumbs. I really do. I think at the sharp end, I think the MP drivers, Kolnagi, Tarpon and Giusti, maybe they're not quite fighting for wins. Maybe they're fighting for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, that sort of level. I think the people most likely to be fighting for the wins are the two Campos drivers, Nal and Ukachukwu, and the three Trident drivers. I think those 5 drivers are going to scoop up most of the big points every weekend, especially in the feature races. But anyway, it's FIA Formula 3. You never really know what's going to happen. So I'm hoping for exciting racing. And a lot of people have Freddie Slater down as the favourite. I just want to talk about Freddie, highly talented driver. If he wins this F3 season, if he wins the championship, he might be the youngest driver ever to win F3. I'm not just talking about F3 as we've known it since 2019, but I mean going back, this sort of international F3 level like GP3 and that. I think the previous youngest one was Bortoletto back in 2023, sorry. Gabriel Bortoletto back in 2023. But I see if Fast Freddie Slater wins it this year, he's the youngest driver to win the F3 Championship that I could think of, because he'll be, in September, he'll be 18 years and 1 month. And when Bortoletto won it, September in 2023, he's 18 years and 11 months. So Freddie will be almost a year younger than Gabriel Bortoletto was at that time, almost 10 months younger. So he'll definitely be the youngest driver to win F3. That'll be an amazing achievement, and surely he's on his way to Formula 1 if he achieves that. But of course, as I said, stacked grid, lots of talented drivers. So let's see what happens, and hopefully the racing is very exciting.